Okay, I'm going to cover this one as well. It's a bit complicated, so sorry about that. But it's about grounding ECUs. Now, I'm going to cover the most difficult example first, and I'm sure other people will say, but that doesn't apply to me because I've got 5-pin coils or something like that, and they say to do this. Um, if you want to engineer your own system, then go for it. I'm just going to explain why OEMs almost always do it this way. So we've got an ECU, and the ground pin on the ECU, everything that's referenced to that ground pin, we want to have at the same voltage. So you'll see various people, even the Haltech wiring diagrams, say to ground the ECU at the battery. And the reasons for that, but what I'm going to explain here is that in a particular case of ignition outputs, we need to make sure that the coil that we're connecting to is referenced to this ground. So if you imagine a 3-terminal coil, like say the R34 Neo coil, for example, it's got an input, it's got a 12-volt supply, and it's got a ground, and then it's got the high voltage output as well. Now the ground, you have to connect the ground to the head of the engine because the high voltage output there goes through the spark plug, and the return path to that is to the head of the engine because that's what the spark plug is screwed into. So if you don't connect the ground, the coil to the same point, then you're going to get this really long, circuitous path, which might affect your spark energy, but the main point is it's going to create a lot of electrical interference. So if you look at any OEM setup, they'll always have coil unplugged, coils grounded to the head. Most of the Japanese ones are 3 terminals like this. On the LS coils, they've got 2 grounds, and they've got 1 ground that goes back to the ECU, which means that the ECU doesn't need to be grounded at the same place. But if you only have 3 terminals, then ideally ground the ECU at the same place to them so that you've got a minimum voltage offset. You might think, well, you're not going to get much voltage offset anyway as long as you've got good grounds, and that's true. But you actually don't need very much. So the R34 Neo coils, they only need 0.7 of a volt to activate once they warm up. And I mean, you're not going to get 0.7 volt across a big thick cable. But you have to remember that there's a fair bit of ground current flowing from the through the ECU because all your injector current grounds, drive-by-wire motor grounds, your oxygen sensor heater current grounds, and that sort of thing are all going through that path. So if you've got, if you imagine an extreme case where you've got a battery at the back of the car, and you run the wire all the way from the battery all the way up to the engine, all the way up to the ECU, and you've got another cable there going to the chassis of the car, and the chassis of the car is connected there. Then you've got quite a long total path there. Through this path, you've got all the voltage drop because of the alternator charging current, because that's going to be charging the battery in that direction, and then through this way, you've got all the voltage drop because of all the loads from the ECU. Apart from the fact that if you've got the battery in the back of the car, the ECU is normally at the front of the car near the engine, so that's a much shorter path anyway. Now, I can understand why Haltech say to ground this at the battery, because when you're explaining to people things to do, you want to make it unambiguous and not open to error and interpretation, that sort of thing. And we've all seen things like ECUs grounded to cam covers, for example, that are actually insulated from the head with a rubber gasket, and then rubber seals on the bolts that hold it in, or it's grounded to the throttle body, and the throttle body is connected to a plastic intake manifold, or something silly like that. So that's the general reason. With something like a 4-wire coil, like on an LS, not really so much of a problem. Although although you do want to make sure that the power ground is still grounded at the head, although the input ground can go back to the ECU. And on the 5-wire coils, like the IGM1As, we've got the ground, the high voltage ground and the low voltage input ground and low voltage power ground. You can connect them. You can connect the power ground to the battery and the high voltage ground to the head, and then the input ground to the ECU if you want to. So that's the general reason. Sensors have got to just go to the sensor ground on the ECU. Don't connect it to the battery, don't connect it to the engine. I've done other videos on that. It gives you voltage offsets and all that sort of thing. I think that's about it. Thank you.